Sylvester Stallone himself, who earned Oscar nominations for both his writing and acting in the iconic film.
Hollywood has always been obsessed with pushing boundaries, but few people predicted where that obsession would lead better than Sylvester Stallone. In 1994, he warned that one day studios would use computers to bring deceased actors back to life, long before audiences ever saw digital ghosts on the big screen. When Brandon Lee died during filming The Crow, that prediction suddenly became reality, and the industry quietly crossed a moral line it still struggles to justify. Now, at age 79, Stallone is finally speaking out, not just about the technology, but about the tragedy that forced Hollywood into the digital afterlife. And the questions he raises are more chilling today than ever. The untold struggles of young Stallone. Long before Sylvester Stallone became the face of underdog, grit, and action movie glory, his story started with a rough beginning that shaped everything that came after. Born on July 6, 1946, he entered a world that was already a little chaotic. His parents lived very different lives. His father worked as a barber with big dreams of becoming a beautician, while his mother held down a job as a cigarette girl at Billy Rose's Diamond Horseshoe, a buzzing hotspot in New York's theater district. But the real challenges began on the day he was born. During delivery, doctors used forceps, and the tool slipped, damaging a nerve on the left side of his face. That accident left him with a drooping mouth and a slurred speech pattern that would follow him for the rest of his life. It wasn't just a cosmetic issue. It shaped how he talked, how he smiled, and, eventually, how people saw him. Growing up, that injury made him an easy target. Even though the world would one day see him as the ultimate tough guy, young Stallone was bullied constantly because of his facial paralysis and distinctive speech. Kids twisted his childhood nickname, Binky, into Stinky, and he carried those memories longer than he ever carried the name. His home life didn't give him much peace either. His parents' marriage fell apart early, and school wasn't exactly a sanctuary. He bounced between multiple schools and seemed to always be one bad day away from another expulsion. But despite the chaos, he eventually made it through high school and even tried college for a while. In fact, he attended several schools, including one in Switzerland, and spent some time studying drama at the University of Miami. Still, the academic world just didn't fit him, and in 1969, he walked away from it all. But something important had happened along the way. He'd caught the acting bug, and the pull was strong enough to make him pack up and head to New York City. That same year, he landed a stage role under the name Mike Stallone, a nod to his actual birth name, Michael. It wasn't fame, not even close, but it was a step. Those next months were far from glamorous. By 1970, Stallone was in the thick of real struggle, the kind where every day feels like a test. He was unemployed, broke, and eventually homeless, sleeping in the Port Authority bus terminal while trying to scrape together enough food to get by. He wrote constantly, hustled for auditions, and took whatever odd jobs he could get, but nothing stuck long enough to change his situation. Then came the moment that forced his hand. At 24, he was offered a lead role in a film. On paper, that sounded like every struggling actor's dream. But once he saw the script, he realized it wasn't a mainstream project at all. It was an adult film called The Party at Kitty and Stud's, and he was being asked to play the role of Stud. It wasn't something he wanted, not even remotely. But he was completely out of options. No money, no food, no roof. In his mind, the choice came down to taking the role or doing something desperate just to survive. So he took the part. To understand that choice, it helps to remember what adult films were like back then. This was the early era, before the internet, before home video. before the whole genre became mainstream and accessible at the click of a button. Back then, the industry was tucked away, limited to a few theaters, and viewed by some as a strange offshoot of independent filmmaking. It wasn't glamorous, but it also wasn't the giant machine it is today. Most people never saw those films, and the actors involved usually faded back into anonymity. Stallone earned $200 for 2 days of work, just enough to keep himself going while he looked for something better. And honestly, if he hadn't become one of the biggest stars on the planet a few years later, that film probably would have stayed buried forever in some dusty corner of adult cinema history. But he didn't stay down. He didn't stay homeless. And those early struggles became the same grit and edge that audiences would one day cheer for. The script that changed everything. Those early years Stallone spent in New York City were some of the darkest and most defining of his entire life. But in the middle of the struggle, he found someone who genuinely steadied him. Sasha Jack. She was an aspiring actress too, trying to carve out her own path, and the two quickly formed a bond. She supported him in every way she could, even letting him move into her apartment and picking up shifts as a waitress, so the two of them could keep the lights on, while he chased a dream that seemed to drift further away each day. But even with Sasha's help, the road didn't suddenly get easier. As the 1970s began, Stallone kept pushing forward, but every rejection chipped at him a little more. At one point, he even tried landing work as an extra in The Godfather, only to be instantly turned down. He picked up a tiny role in the comedy What's Up, Doc? Though you'd need a magnifying glass to spot him on screen. It reached a point where giving up didn't just seem possible, it seemed almost practical. Then, right when he was barely hanging on, the persistence finally paid off. In 1973, he landed the lead role in The Lords of Flatbush. The production dragged on for years because of financial problems, but the opportunity mattered. At the same time, he snagged his first true leading role in an independent film called No Place to Hide, later re-released as Rebel. It wasn't glamorous, but it was progress. His personal life was rising alongside his career. Through every disappointment and every near miss, Sasha stayed planted firmly beside him. With all that loyalty between them, marriage felt like the natural next step. On December 28, 1974, they tied the knot, and before the decade ended, they welcomed 2 sons, Sage and Sergio. Professionally, Stallone had reached his breaking point with the Hollywood system. He was tired of waiting for someone else to hand him the perfect role. So, in 1975, he took control of his destiny. He kept landing jobs here and there, but none of them offered what he really wanted, a character who reflected the kind of strength, vulnerability, and humanity he believed he could bring to the screen. And then came the moment that changed everything. He was sitting in the crowd at a boxing match, watching the great Muhammad Ali fight a rugged underdog named Chuck Wepner. Something about that matchup lit a fire in him. 3 days after the fight, he finished the first draft of a script he titled Rocky. Preparing for the role took a physical toll as he trained intensely, dropping so much weight that the left side of his already injured face began to droop. To correct it, he underwent plastic surgery. He later pointed out the faint scar behind his left ear and even joked about people assuming he'd had a facelift. He explained that there was no scar on the right ear and wondered aloud how anyone could believe he could afford to fix just one side. The droop and the surgery contributed to a habit he has kept ever since, insisting that photographers shoot only his right side. With the script finished, Stallone went studio to studio asking if anyone wanted to buy it. Surprisingly, several did. Producers Robert Chartoff and Irwin Winkler eventually offered a massive sum, $350,000, for the rights. For a man who had spent nights sleeping in bus terminals, that kind of money was staggering. But there was a problem. They wanted a different actor in the lead role. Stallone refused. To him, Rocky wasn't just a character. He was the embodiment of every hardship, every failure, every moment he had been counted out. He insisted that if they wanted the script, they had to take him as the star. It became a tense standoff, but the story was simply too powerful to walk away from. Chartoff and Winkler eventually agreed. Their concession proved to be one of the smartest decisions of their careers. Stallone's performance electrified audiences. Critics raved. Roger Ebert even said Stallone reminded him of a young Marlon Brando. The public reaction was even more intense. When Rocky hit theaters, it didn't just open strong, it exploded into a cultural phenomenon. In Philadelphia, the city at the heart of the film's story, fans embraced the character so deeply that they honored him with a full statue at the entrance of the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Right beside the legendary steps Rocky ran up in the film. Award season confirmed what everyone already felt. Rocky wasn't just beloved, it was respected. Stallone earned nominations for both Best Actor and Best Screenplay, a rare double achievement shared at that time by only two giants of cinema, Orson Welles and Charlie Chaplin. And all of this momentum, all of this acclaim, led directly to one of the most important encounters in Stallone's entire life. The Golden Globe showdown that sparked rivalry. Back in 1977, Sylvester Stallone had no idea that he was walking straight into one of the most important encounters of his entire career. The stage for this moment wasn't a film set or a studio office. It was the 34th Golden Globe Awards. Rocky was on fire that year, racking up 6 nominations, and Stallone showed up as Hollywood's new underdog-turned-superstar. But the universe had a sense of humor that night, because the seat right beside him belonged to a man who would eventually become his greatest rival in the action world, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And from the moment they sat down, the energy between them didn't feel like two dignified actors at their first big awards show. It felt like two kids daring each other to blink first. Things really took a turn when Schwarzenegger won the New Star of the Year award for Stay Hungry. Meanwhile, Rocky kept getting passed over in category after category. According to Stallone, every time the film lost, Arnold laughed across the table, like he was enjoying the show a little too much. When Rocky finally snagged its last nomination of the night, Stallone hit his breaking point. In a burst of frustration, he grabbed a big bowl of flowers and hurled it straight at his soon-to-be nemesis. It was quick, chaotic, and just the beginning of a rivalry that would stretch across decades. But once the petals settled, Stallone did what he always did. He got back to work. At that point, he had conquered acting and writing. The next step was total creative control. In 1978, he made that leap with Paradise Alley, writing, starring in, and directing the film. Critics were split on the result, but it proved one thing clearly. Stallone wasn't afraid to take risks. Then came the comeback punch. In 1979, Rocky the Sectorin Tweed hit theaters and became a massive success, reviving the Balboa magic all over again. And as iconic as Rocky was, Stallone was already chasing another character who would redefine his career. He found that spark in David Morrell's novel, First Blood. The story struck him deeply, and he pushed hard to bring it to the big screen. When the film arrived in 1982, Stallone didn't just star as John Rambo, he reshaped the character completely. The book's Rambo was colder, less human. Stallone injected vulnerability, trauma, and a kind of quiet dignity. Critics noticed instantly, calling his version an upgrade from the novel. And just when audiences thought one blockbuster was enough, Stallone dropped Rocky III in that same year. That meant juggling two wildly different physiques, fighter and soldier, all at once. He trained 6 days a week until his body fat supposedly dropped to a jaw-dropping 2.8%. That momentum kept rolling into 1985 with Rambo, First Blood Part 2, and Rocky IV. Two massive franchises, one man, back-to-back. Over the years, he'd returned to these roles again and again, eventually starring in a staggering 13 combined films. Of course, pushing the limits came with real risks. One of the most shocking injuries of his career happened on the Rocky IV set. Stallone dared Dolph Lundgren, who played the powerhouse Ivan Drago, to hit him in the chest full force. Lundgren did exactly that. The punch sent Stallone straight to the hospital, proving Drago's power wasn't just movie magic. Meanwhile, the off-screen rivalry with Schwarzenegger was heating up. In 1985, Arnold spoke to the News of the World and suggested that Stallone relied heavily on body doubles in his action scenes. It was a jab straight at Sly's pride, and he didn't forget it. Behind closed doors, another part of Stallone's life was falling apart. His marriage to Sasha Zach had survived the struggle years, but fame changed everything. Their relationship deteriorated, and by February 1985, they divorced. But Stallone didn't stay single for long. Before the year even ended, he met Brigitte Nielsen, an aspiring actress who made a bold move to get his attention. While he was staying in a Manhattan hotel, she slid a photograph of herself under his door with a short message and her number on the back. Stallone called her that same night. The chemistry was instant, explosive, and almost too intense for its own good. They married just months after meeting. Producer Irwin Winkler later said they were very much in love at that time. But that intensity didn't last. 19 months later, the marriage collapsed in a storm of rumors and accusations they both denied. Years later, Nielsen admitted the truth. They never should have married one another, and the breakup turned ugly fast. Even then, Stallone's love life kept moving. He began dating model Jennifer Flavin, and they stayed together from 1988 to 1994. But 6 years didn't magically turn him into a model partner. The relationship ended when Stallone admitted he'd been seeing another model, Janice Dickinson, who was reportedly pregnant and claimed he was the father. And as he dealt with romantic chaos, the battles in his public career kept growing bolder. Stallone had become a superstar, but he was also becoming comfortable playing the game with a little more edge, especially when it came to dealing with rivals, on screen and off. Hollywood rivalry that turned dirty. By the late 1980s, Schwarzenegger was right on Sylvester Stallone's heels, pushing hard for the title of Hollywood's top action star. But while Arnold was rising fast, he had no idea a storm of bad press was heading straight for him. Out of nowhere, the tabloid News of the World accused him of sympathizing with Germany's Third Reich, claiming his father was involved in the atrocities of the Holocaust. It was a shocking accusation, and Arnold was furious. It took 2 years for the real story to surface. The tabloid had twisted a few facts and simply invented the rest. Yes, Gustav Schwarzenegger, an Austrian, did have ties to Germany during World War II. But Arnold was born 2 years after the war ended and had always spoken openly about his contempt for the Third Reich. Still, the damage from the rumor lingered. Then things took an even wilder turn. During the lawsuit that Arnold filed against the article's writer, Wendy Lee, she revealed where she had gotten her information. Her source was none other than Sylvester Stallone, who had even covered her legal fees. Suddenly, everything clicked. Stallone had been so consumed with beating his rival that he was willing to spark a firestorm just to rattle him. That rivalry ate at Stallone more than he ever let on. There was even a night in a nightclub when he refused to stay unless the staff removed a picture of Arnold from the wall. His resentment was loud, messy, and impossible to hide. And honestly, it didn't help that his career was inching downward as the 1990s approached. Trying to regain his footing, Stallone returned to the Rocky saga with Rocky V, calling back the original film's director, John G. Avildsen, to close out the story. But fans weren't feeling it. The movie landed with a thud, disappointing audiences everywhere. Meanwhile, Arnold kept playing mind games like he had all the time in the world. That same frustration followed Stallone right into 1992 with Stop, or My Mom Will Shoot. The wild part was that Stallone only took the role because he thought Arnold wanted it. In reality, Arnold had pretended to be interested purely to bait Sly into grabbing what he knew would be a total flop. And it worked. But Stallone's professional embarrassment was nothing compared to the personal blow that came next. He had broken up with Jennifer Flavin and proposed to Janice Dickinson because he believed he was the father of her child, only for a DNA test to reveal he wasn't. Realizing the relationship was a disaster, he called off the engagement immediately. His career wasn't faring much better. In 1995, he starred in Judge Dredd, a futuristic action movie that American audiences basically shrugged at. But international viewers came through, helping it scrape back its massive $100 million budget. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get more chaotic, life threw him a rare blessing. His personal world began to settle. Years after their split, Stallone and Jennifer Flavin found their way back to each other. By 1997, they were both fully committed, and they finally tied the knot. Before long, they welcomed the first of their 3 daughters. And Stallone wasn't just rebuilding his love life, he was starting to mend fences with Schwarzenegger, too. Both of their careers were slowing down as Hollywood shifted, and that shared struggle gave them a surprising sense of common ground. By the year 2000, word was spreading about a film project the two were working on together. It felt like a new millennium truce, even if the era didn't immediately turn their careers around. When the 2000s rolled in, Stallone was hoping to leave the string of box office disappointments behind him. But his first film of the decade, Get Carter, fell flat. And the movies that followed didn't offer much relief. Then something even more serious hit. In 2001, a woman named Margie Carr accused him of assault. His legal team quickly pointed out that she had already tried to sell her story to a tabloid a month earlier. Stallone, unshaken, went back to work, focusing on a mission many fans never expected him to attempt: rewriting Rocky's legacy. He took total creative control of 2006's Rocky Balboa, writing, directing, and starring in the film. This time, fans embraced it. The movie more than doubled its budget in the US alone, proving that Rocky would always be the role closest to Stallone's heart. By the late 2000s, Stallone was practically defined by 2 characters, Rocky and Rambo. And when a fan asked him which one he wanted to be remembered for most, he didn't hesitate. Rocky was his first baby. But he wasn't done yet. He was gearing up for another massive swing. Despite all the ups and downs, the action genre was full of legends, and he was ready to gather them in one place. So in 2010, he wrote, directed, and starred in The Expendables, bringing in heavy hitters like Jason Statham, Terry Crews, and even Schwarzenegger. But filming action at nearly 65 came with consequences. Stallone insisted on doing many of his own stunts, and he paid for it. During an intense scene with Steve Austin, he broke his neck and wound up with a metal plate implanted. And that injury wasn't the only trouble waiting for him as he pushed deeper into the decade. The controversial chapter. No one knows. Sylvester Stallone had spent decades living under the spotlight, so controversy wasn't exactly new territory for him. But when 2013 arrived, the media dug up an entirely different layer of family drama, one that went straight back to the 1980s. According to those resurfaced reports, Stallone had been sending monthly payments to his half-sister, Toni Ann Felitti, and covering her medical and psychiatric bills. On the surface, it looked like generosity. But the story flipped when she supposedly threatened to sue him, accusing him of mistreatment. Instead of folding, Stallone and his camp went on the offensive. And even though he eventually settled the situation with a massive $2 million payout, his team denied every accusation. They claimed she was blackmailing him to fuel her addiction, a claim even his own mother publicly backed. Yet, despite the mess swirling around him, Stallone wasn't done with the role that defined his career. Rocky Balboa had already given the franchise a beautiful, heartfelt curtain call, but Stallone clearly wasn't finished with the Italian stallion. In 2015, he stepped back into the character for Creed, directed by Ryan Coogler. It was a bold move that paid off big. Audiences loved it, critics praised it, and suddenly Stallone was right back in the cultural conversation. But as usual, success didn't shield him from controversy. To understand the next scandal, the story had to rewind to 1986, then leap ahead to 2016, when old accusations suddenly resurfaced. During the filming of Over the Top in Las Vegas, a leaked police report described a disturbing claim from a 16-year-old girl. She alleged that she ended up in Stallone's hotel room with him and his bodyguard, Mike DeLuca, and that what followed was a series of sexual acts she felt pressured into. The report said she told police Stallone warned her to stay quiet, making a chilling comment about them being married men and joking about violence if she talked. She filed a report back then, but ultimately chose not to press charges. The case disappeared until the Daily Mail published the story in 2016. Stallone's reps immediately called it a ridiculous lie. They insisted he'd never even heard of these allegations before that article, and that no police ever contacted him. His then-wife, Brigitte Nielsen, also defended him, saying there was no opportunity for the encounter to have happened because they were together constantly while in Vegas. And just like that, the allegations sat on the shelf. Explosive, denied, and with no legal action taken. But the cycle wasn't over. In 2017, another woman came forward, claiming Stallone sexually assaulted her during a 1990 meeting at his Los Angeles office. Santa Monica police confirmed they were investigating a complaint from a woman reporting misconduct from the 1990s. Stallone once again denied everything. His attorney, Marty Singer, said the accuser filed a false police report and insisted Stallone had zero contact with her in 1990. However, Stallone did acknowledge that he spent a few days with her in 1987 while filming a movie in Israel. He stressed that she was not a minor, he was single at the time, and nothing criminal occurred. Singer even said Stallone intended to file his own complaint to investigate the alleged false report. Ultimately, though, it was up to the Los Angeles District Attorney to decide the next step. By 2018, the DA's office had reviewed everything and announced that there wasn't enough evidence to move forward. No witnesses could corroborate the claims, so Stallone wasn't charged with anything. Legally, he walked away clean. Even with the controversies stacking up, his personal life seemed to be stabilizing, at least for a while. After years of infidelity rumors and relationship strain, his marriage to Jennifer Flavin appeared steady until 2022. That year, things fell apart so badly that Flavin filed for divorce. The rumor mill erupted when Stallone posted a new tattoo, a portrait of his dog, Butkus. Fans quickly noticed the tattoo, covered the one he had of Flavin on his arm. Suddenly, people were whispering that the marriage ended over a dog, and that the couple fought over Stallone wanting to bring a new one into the home. Stallone shut that down immediately. In an interview with TMZ, he insisted the split had nothing to do with a trivial disagreement. He explained that they had simply grown apart, and he spoke extremely highly of Jennifer, calling her the nicest human being he had ever met. What made the situation even more interesting was what happened next. Neither he nor Flavin revealed the real reason they nearly divorced, and they still haven't. But unlike so many relationships that ended in chaos for Stallone, this one took a very different turn. Just 1 month after news of the divorce broke, the couple announced they were reconciling. A representative confirmed that they met up at home, talked through their issues, and genuinely tried to repair what was broken. Stallone later admitted that part of the problem might have been him pouring too much of himself into work and not enough into the people around him. He described that period as tumultuous, a wake-up call, really. And he shared the biggest lesson he walked away with, realizing what truly mattered. His love for his family, he said, had to come before everything else. It wasn't an easy lesson, but it redirected his priorities in a way his career never could. At 79, Sylvester Stallone breaks silence on Brandon Lee's death. Sylvester Stallone saw the future coming long before anyone else realized what was on the horizon. Back in 1994, when CGI was still finding its footing in Hollywood, he predicted something that sounded wild at the time: the idea that studios would one day bring deceased actors back to life digitally. Today, that prediction feels less like a guess and more like a warning he delivered decades ahead of schedule. CGI wasn't brand new in the early 90s, but movies like Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park made it crystal clear that visual effects were about to change filmmaking forever. Suddenly, directors had the power to create worlds, creatures, and scenes that practical effects could barely dream of. The Lord of the Rings trilogy later became a prime example, showing how far this technology could take storytelling when it was used with ambition and skill. But of course, not every film got it right. Some pushed too hard, too fast, and the results were rough. Think of projects like The Mummy Returns or The Much-Mocked Cats. Those films showed that CGI could elevate a story, but it could also completely derail one. One of the biggest and most sensitive conversations around CGI has always been the idea of resurrecting actors. The first major instance came with 1994's The Crow. After Brandon Lee tragically died during production, the filmmakers almost shut everything down. In the end, they chose to finish the movie as a tribute. They used a body double, future John Wick director Chad Stahelski, and then applied early CGI techniques to complete Lee's remaining scenes. Fans and critics generally agreed it was a respectful, necessary use of technology in an impossible situation. That same year, Stallone was on the set of Judge Dredd, a movie built mostly on practical effects and massive sets. In an old behind-the-scenes documentary, recently resurfaced by the Italian Stallion YouTube channel, Stallone casually made a prediction that now feels downright prophetic. He talked about a future where computers could flawlessly replicate an actor's face and voice, even long after that actor had passed away. He imagined long-dead performers starring in new films, revived by digital wizardry. At the time, there had been small hints of this idea, like a 1991 Diet Coke commercial that stitched together old footage of icons like Humphrey Bogart and Louis Armstrong. But Stallone was thinking bigger. He foresaw full-blown performances, crafted from pixels instead of people. Fast forward to the present, and it's clear he was right. Rogue One stunned audiences by digitally recreating Peter Cushing's likeness. so his character, Grand Moff Tarkin, could return to the screen decades after the actor's death. Before that, Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow used Laurence Olivier's image to portray its main villain. These weren't cameos, they were full digital performances. And this is where the controversy really heats up. With films like The Crow or Furious 7, where Paul Walker's brothers stepped in to help finish his scenes, most viewers understood the intention. These were emotional, last-resort uses of technology meant to honor the actors involved. But Rogue One introduced something else entirely. A new performance built on the face of someone who had been gone for nearly 20 years. It raised questions that the industry still hasn't fully answered. Those questions got even louder in 2019, when the team behind the Vietnam drama Finding Jack announced plans to digitally resurrect James Dean for a major role. 60 years after his death, his image was being revived for a movie he never signed on for. The backlash from actors, directors, and even Dean's fans was immediate and fierce. And now, the rise of deep-fake technology adds another twist. With just a bit of footage, anyone's face can be convincingly swapped into any scene. Audiences have already seen Jim Carrey's face pasted onto Jack Nicholson in The Shining, and Stallone himself inserted into movies like Terminator 2 and Home Alone. It's impressive, eerie, and raises even more ethical questions about ownership, consent, and artistic integrity.